Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for Breakout session number 5. My name is Quinn, and I'll be your host for this session. Today, we are privileged to have Dayn'l Beeler as our guest speaker. She'll be sharing her knowledge and expertise with us on the journey of optimal aging with a diagnosis of autism in adulthood. So before we begin, I would like to remind you all that we value your feedback, and this session is eligible for continuing education credit. And today's speaker has nothing to disclose. If you would like to receive credit for attending, please stay on until the end of the session and complete the evaluation for this session that is in the email you received titled OAC 2023 Post-Session Evaluation link. We encourage you to actively participate in this session by putting your questions and thoughts in the chat. We believe the information presented today will be valuable and informative for all of us. So thanks again for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this session, and I would like to hand it over to Ms. Beeler.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. It's not sharing it the way I want it to. Sorry. Really. Try it again. All right. All righty. So my name is Dayn'l Beeler. I don't know how to make it bigger. I'll just do this. Actually, we'll just do this. My name is Dayn'l Beeler. On paper, I am a social worker, a certified social worker, but I work for the Trigger Institute as a program coordinator. And today we're just going to casually talk about a journey of optimal aging with a diagnosis of autism in adulthood. So just something to think about when you hear autism. What is the first thing that comes to mind? If you would like to answer the question, you can put it in the chat. So the first thing we're going to do is meet the speaker, me. So I'm going to start with a few photos of me as a child. So that's myself and one of my cousins. And that's me as a toddler again. And me as a young girl again. It's 2 photos of me there. And I chose these photos because the look on my face. I've always looked back on photos and I will say, why do I have a blank stare on my face? I always look confused. But as of a little over a year ago, I've learned that I am level 1 autistic. So that's me also right before my diagnosis, graduating with my master's in social work. So the history of autism. Autism was used to describe schizophrenic patients in 1908. So that's the first time that it was used. In 1943, early infantile autism was used by Dr. Leo Kanner to describe 11 highly intelligent children who desired to be alone and had obsessiveness of persistent sameness. In 1944, Hans Asperger notes a milder form of autism coined Asperger syndrome, due to observing cases of boys who were highly intelligent but struggled socially and with obsessive interest. And when we think about the boys that were being observed, these boys were white boys. So that's how autism was observed for so many years. It was looked through the lens of a white child and these obsessive behaviors, struggling socially. So just keep that in mind. In 1967, Bruno Bettelheim, a psychologist, theorized that mothers who did not love their children enough caused the children to be autistic. In 1980, infantile autism is listed in the DSM. And then in 1987, autism disorder replaced infantile autism in the DSM and it included a list of criteria. In 1994, Asperger's syndrome is added to the DSM. And then you jump up nearly 10 years later, Asperger's syndrome is removed from the DSM and autism spectrum disorder is added. So Asperger's syndrome is removed and it's not used like it used to be. That term is not used like it was even like 5 years ago. So if we look in the DSM-5, criterion A, the phrase as manifested by the following was changed in the DSM-5 text review. It was changed to as manifested by all of the following. So to go over the autism spectrum disorder criteria from the DSM-5, it says to meet the diagnostic criteria, the ASD, according to the DSM-5, a child must have persistent defects in each of the 3 areas of social communication and interaction. So that will show you point A and those subpoints, and then we'll go down to point B. Plus, they have to have at least 2 of the 4 restrictive repetitive behaviors that's in B, in section B. And so for A is persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts as manifested by the following, currently or by history. Examples are illustrative, but not exhaustive. So under that one, the first criteria is deficits in social emotional reciprocity, ranging, for example, from abnormal social approach and failure of normal back and forth conversation to reduced sharing of interests, emotions, or affect to failure to initiate or respond to social interactions. And then B says deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interaction, ranging, for example, from poorly integrated verbal and nonverbal communication to abnormalities in eye contact and body language, or deficits in understanding and use of gestures to a total lack of facial expressions and nonverbal communication. So deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships ranging, for example, from difficulties adjusting behavior to suit various social contexts, to difficulties in sharing imaginative play or in making friends, or absence of interest in peers. And so when diagnosing autism, you would specify the severity. And so there are 3 levels now. So we'll say level 1, 2, and 3. Level 3 requires substantial support. So that will be someone who's nonverbal, shows behaviors. Level 2 requires substantial support, but not as much as a level 3. And then level 1 just requires support, some support. And I'll talk more about that. So to continue with the criterion in section B, the patient or client has restrictive, repetitive patterns of behavior, interest, or activities as manifested by at least 2 of the following, currently or by history. So point B, which it should say A, B, C, D, but stereotyped or repetitive motor movements use of objects or speech. So simple motor stereotypes, lining up toys or flipping objects, echolalia, which is repeating what someone else says, idiosyncratic phrases, um, insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines or ritual patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior. So extreme distress and small changes, difficulties with transitioning from one thing to the next, rigid thinking patterns, greeting rituals, need to take same route or eat same food every day, highly restricted fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus. So that means such as strong attachment to or preoccupation with unusual objects, excessively circumscribed or um, persevative interest. And then we have E, which is hyper or hypoactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment. So apparent indifference to pain or temperature, adverse response to specific sounds or textures, excessive smelling or touching of objects, visual fascination with lights or movement. And again, you specify the severity. So level 3, they require very substantial support. Level 2 requires substantial support, and level 1 requires some support. And then the last few criteria. So C, symptoms must be present in early developmental period, but may not become fully manifested until social demands exceed limited capacities or may be masked by learned strategies and later in life. The symptoms cause clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, and other important areas of current functioning. And E, these disturbances are not better explained by intellectual disability, like an intellectual developmental disorder or global developmental delay. So the intellectual disability and autism spectrum disorder frequently co-occur. So an individual can be on the autism, that can have autism spectrum disorder and an intellectual disability. So to make comorbid diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder and intellectual disability, social communication should be below the expected for general developmental level. So a quick note, individuals with well-established DSM-4 diagnostics of autism disorder, Asperger's disorder, or pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, should be given the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. So anyone who was diagnosed with Asperger's or they were diagnosed with autistic disorder or pervasive developmental disorder, that diagnostic should be changed or diagnosis should be changed from those to autism spectrum disorder. So here we go. And then of course you specify. So with the diagnosis, you can specify if the individual is with or without accompanying intellectual impairment, with or without accompanying language impairment, if associated with a known medical or genetic condition or environmental factors. And then a coding note, if the individual associated with another neurodevelopmental mental or behavioral disorder or with catatonia. So if an individual has any of those, the practitioner should specify in the diagnosis. So just to kind of talk about some stereotypes, one to kind of go back to what I said in the timeline with autism was first founded upon behaviors of young white boys. So that's why I have the cultural competency. So the stereotypes, like when you think of autism, a lot of people think of like the hand flapping, rocking back and forth. They think about nonverbal or maybe someone who shouts out and cries and have behavioral issues. When I talk to other people, that is typically what they think of autism, but that is not the case. So if you remember, I said that I was diagnosed with autism level 1 a little over a year ago, and I was diagnosed after my daughter was diagnosed. Um, she was 13 at the time, and I knew as her mom that something was different and something, I knew there was something. However, the doctors really wouldn't listen to me. So finally, after so many years of trying to get help and get the support that she needs, I found a autistic practitioner who studies autism deeply and understands the cultural differences and understands the stereotypes. So I just put a few photos up, um, some things that people say. So it can say, oh, like someone say, Dayn'l suffers from autism. So it's kind of like suffer from autism. What is autism, hit me over the head? Or they can say Dayn'l's on the spectrum, like I'm standing on top of a spectrum, or a person with autism. So when we think of with autism, it's carrying it, it's with you. But a lot of folks prefer to use autistic person, and I use autistic person a lot. I'm autistic. I mean, it is what it is. The whole "you don't look autistic," I got that a lot, for both myself and my daughter. So it was a funny, a funny meme that I saw online. It says, "I've dyed my hair. I wear the same outfit every day, like an anime character, and I've showered twice this week. What more do you want from me?" Like when someone said, "You don't look autistic," and it's funny because my daughter wears the same clothes over and over and over. Um, and I would even be like, "You want to try something different today?" Um, but if that's what you like, that's just what she likes, right? Goodness. So then we have the question: can adults have autism? So, as it says, well, considering the linear nature of time and aging, I love to hear the alternative. Adults can have autism because autistic children grow up to be autistic adults. And a lot of times it's missed, just like in my case, it was missed. I struggle tremendously in social settings. I can't be around people for too long, or I start to get overwhelmed, kind of feel closed in. So a lot of times I will remove myself and kind of sit back in a corner or go to a different room, which I've been basically told previously that that's wrong. I shouldn't be like that. But that's just my nature. That's just who I am. And come to find out, I'm autistic, right? So, telling neurotypicals I'm autistic. So saying like I'm autistic, and this is something I hear all the time also. I don't think you are. Well, everyone's a bit autistic. But you make eye contact because that's one of the stereotypes. You don't make eye contact, which I do struggle with that also. And I feel like when I work really hard to maintain eye contact, it gets weird. So, I mean, I can't help it. So telling autistic people that I'm autistic. So telling a neurotypical, you get those responses. Telling another autistic person I'm autistic, that autistic person will be like, yeah, I know. So it kind of goes to now providing care to undiagnosed and late diagnosed and neurodivergent individuals with the emphasis on optimally aging with autism. So I kind of use myself with this because I have gone my whole life with autism up until last year, and I have learned to mask. I have learned to just adapt. I have learned to, I mean, hide it, which people already, they'll say, oh, you got really quiet, or, so there were those signs that I was autistic, but no one really saw those signs, or they just thought, she's just a quiet person, or she, you know, just don't like being around people, or she really don't want friends. Um, so providing care to someone who's not diagnosed or late diagnosed, and even other neurodivergent individuals, we have to be very cognizant when speaking, especially as clinicians, when speaking with clients or even our loved ones who, you might say, they might be autistic. Um, just understanding that autistic looks different in everyone it varies. So my daughter has autism level 1, so she's a level 1 autistic, and I'm a level 1 autistic, right? But our autism is different, and we bump heads all the time because it's so different. The way she perceive things is different from the way I perceive things. Like her understanding of certain things is different from my understanding. So we do bump heads, but it has made it easier for me now that we have our diagnoses to better understand our relationship, our dynamic, and what I can do better to help. Um, and also not just providing care to individuals, but providing support to individuals. I can say, with my current job, they're very supportive. And after I learned about having, being autistic, I was like, I really want to speak in front of a group. I really want to be able to lead a group. I really want to do things that I've never done because of who I am. But I love a good challenge. So having the support from my employer to say, yeah, well, you can do that. We'll allow you to do that is great. So just being supportive, providing care, just being understanding, just listening to the person or the individual when talking with them. Because if you are a practitioner, you may run into someone who is not diagnosed, or maybe they self-diagnose. And if someone's self-diagnosed, that's okay. They'll show them respect. And, sometimes we have to learn how to better communicate. Um, so that's super important. So that was the end of my slide. If anyone has any questions, comments, I will be glad to answer those. You can unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat. I will say it has been very difficult for me because I grew up thinking that I was different, I was weird. So getting my diagnosis did it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders where I feel like I could accept myself more because now I know why I have issues socially, why I oftentimes, seclude myself from others, why sometimes I have difficulty speaking to other people, holding the eye contact, why I have some of the stems that I have that I didn't know were stems. I just thought it's just something that I do. Um, but it just made so much sense. And being able to have a diagnosis for my daughter also at the age of 13, that also was very refreshing because I knew, but I wasn't listened to. And finally, after about 7 years, I had someone finally listen to me and say, okay, let's assess her. We can do this. And it was very quick. Like the practitioner knew right away, which was great. So I know it's only 12:24 p.m. here in Louisville, Kentucky. But if you have any questions or any comments, or even what do you think about, like the first question when you think of autism, what is the first thing that comes to mind? And you can use the chat or you can unmute.
Dayn'l, I have a comment just
Yeah.
because your presentation was great and it just got me thinking a lot. And I think one of my biggest takeaways from this is just making sure to be cognizant of every individual and their preferences, and that we need to be respectful of that. Like for example, you had stated that you prefer to be called an autistic person.
Mhm.
And in the past, so I have an undergrad degree in special education, and I spent years teaching individuals with autism. And I was always, I guess, told to use person first language. And so I was always told it was wrong of me to say that, and that I needed to say, this is Bobby. Bobby has autism, so that it didn't sound like I was that autism is what defines Bobby, for example. And so I think that just shows that, not everything is the same for everyone, and it's all about personal preference and how we need to be respectful of all of us as individuals and the way we prefer to be spoken to and spoken about, because really when it comes down to it, that's what's most important, and we should have a say in how we identify. So I don't know, that was kind of my
Absolutely.
takeaway. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Absolutely. Everyone's going to be different. So there's people who prefer with autism, affected by autism, but it just depends on that individual, that person, how they prefer to be named or diagnosed. I am autistic, and it's just, and I think for me it's easy for me to say it that way because I didn't know for almost 35 years, so and I always kind of felt as if I was different, an outcast. I will always say I'm weird, there's something wrong with me and things like that because I didn't know. um and I will see like people from school, they even now, I graduated in 2005, high school in 2005. So even now, some of those people are still friends with each other and they hang out and they still talk, but I don't have that because I never had that connection with other people in high school or in school in general. Um, so it really did help me to say, okay, I don't have to feel bad at all.
Absolutely. And Dia posted in the chat, she said, thank you for sharing. All individuals are unique. Autistic persons or individuals with a diagnosis of autism are just that, unique.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, so it looks like we don't have any other comments or questions. Um, don't forget to take what is it, the survey. Don't forget to take the survey that you received in your email. And if you are looking for C's, you have to do the survey anyway. Um, so just keep that in mind. You can have 30 minutes of your term back, maybe hop into another session. Um, which would be great also if you can hop into another session and find something that you're interested in. But if not, everyone, you all have a great day.
Thank you so much, Ms. Beeler. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.